Hey, hi guys. This is Paul N0T with the Front Range 6 Meter Group. And today we have Lance and W7GJ from the great state of Montana going to talk about his trip to the South Pacific on doing 6 meter EME roving. So with that, I'm going to throw it over to Lance and let you do the honors there.
Okay, thanks very much, Paul, and good evening to all the familiar faces and call signs here. It's great to see such a big turnout. Let me see how I can share my screen, and we'll get going here. Does that work?
Yep, it works so far pretty good. Yep, I think so.
Oh, okay, super. I will explain a little bit about what goes into the DX expedition that I just went on to 2DXCC down in French Polynesia. And I'll try to move through the slides pretty fast because I want to give you a flavor for the islands I went to, as well as the background of the DX expedition. And hopefully if you have specific things that you want to look at, you can go back to the recording on YouTube and look at the specifics. And hopefully we'll have enough time for questions or discussion at the end. So without further ado, this is the 6 meter EME D expedition that I went on last fall to both the Austral and Marquesas Islands in French Polynesia. I picked French Polynesia because I know a lot of people in North America had already worked some of those DXCC during F2 days, but they were both still very rare in Europe and in Asia, in fact. So that's why I picked those. And here's where they are. Basically, you can see from the maps that French Polynesia is in basically the center of the South Pacific. And in French Polynesia, there's 3 DXCC. There's one in the middle, which many people have worked on EM. Well, some people have worked anyway on EME, have worked FO4BM, who until recently had a M² 7-element Yagi up on 6 meters. I'm not sure when he's going to get that repaired and back up again. So I didn't want to duplicate that one. So I went down south to do the Austral Islands and up north to do the Marquesas Islands. So these were the two details on the 2 CQDX zones that I activated. The first one, I used the call sign of FO/W7GJ, or as it turned out, many times I just used W7GJ and my grid square. And the Marquesas was TX7MB. And I got that call sign because initially KB7Q was going to join me and work 2 meter moon bounce at the same time I was on 6 meters. But Gene had to pull out at the last minute because of the COVID situation and complications in travel arrangements due to that. So basically, having decided where I was going to go, here's quickly are some of the considerations in picking a spot in those DXCC. Pick a spot far from noise and far from populated areas. Look for a spot with good ground gain opportunities, either on moonrise and or moonset, reliable AC power, safe place, access to food and water, can be reachable without chartering a $500,000 ship, free from dangerous sicknesses, free from political unrest, like in XT right now, provides a clearing large enough to set up and operate the antenna, which I try to get a 60-foot diameter clearing. as it turns out, in both of these places that I picked, I just barely had enough to put up the antenna, and to do so and raise it amidst the obstacles, I had to actually elevate the antenna as I raised it to clear things. And I try to set it up so that the antenna will never be pointed back at the station. That worked out fine for the Austral Islands and Rimatara. I couldn't find that a suitable site in the Marquesas Islands, so I set up the antenna directly south of the station. And so even though it would be pointing north, as I followed the moon across the sky, I would be at maximum elevation during that time. And as it turned out, that was not a problem at all. The only time that I had RF problems in this situation was when I was at KH8, and I was kind of southwest of the antenna. And when I would point the antenna west, there was a lobe that caused some problems. So in this situation, it worked out great. I tried to find a place that's never been before activated on 6-meter EME. Is rare, and most 6-meter EME operators need it. Permits operation on 6 meters. And so when I found the sites, then I needed to figure out a time to go when the moon windows would allow me to contact the active 6-meter EME stations around the world, and also tried to find times when the degradation would be low. You know, when you're going to two places, though, I had to compromise, and the lowest degradation was in the Marquesas, and I had higher degradation when I was in the Austral Islands. But in the Austral Islands, I also was operating at night, so I had no interference from the daytime high total electron content to the east, which as it turned out was a better situation for me. I tried to avoid major seasons of ionospheric propagation, avoid stormy and rainy seasons, maximize the ability to physically aim at the moon. And this was a compromise also with the Marquesas, because after the first few days, I would, you know, the moon would be going way too high for me to aim at it. And, you know, you do what you can when you're trying to juggle these schedules, but I send out email and the schedules of my operation 6 months in advance to everyone. And I told them, be sure to work me early on before my moon gets above 45 degrees. So I sent out a plea to people. And I try to minimize the daytime operation when I can. And then several times I had to finalize the changes in transportation and changes in licensing for both places due to the date changes and delays due to COVID, and also changes in equipment that I had. And the packing thing was an ongoing thing. I have a spreadsheet for all of the suitcases and exactly what every piece of weighs that's going in every suitcase, and juggled everything around so that I could meet the 50-pound limits per suitcase. This was especially bad to French Polynesia because you were only allowed one carry-on that could weigh no more than 5 kilograms. So I bought myself a nylon fishing vest and filled it up with 5 kilograms worth of stuff to wear onto the plane. Plus, I had a 5 kilogram backpack that had my computer and all my clothes in it. And that's in addition to 4 50-pound pieces of luggage that I had to ship as excess baggage. So I'm going to try to trim it down next time, but I did the best I could, and I left out a lot of extra parts and things that I normally take with me in order to meet these requirements. And of course, where there were lots of special forms that had to be filled out for the French Polynesian government about COVID and get approval. I had to take vaccination, proof of vaccination. I had to get 4 COVID tests over the course of the month that we were gone. And so it was also necessary, as I said, to send out my planned operating schedules well in advance. So here's the first spot. It was at La Perouche Rouge Pension, right in the middle of the north part of the island, with a clear shot over to the ocean on moonset, clear shot pretty much on moonrise, and no villages to the north of me as the moon passed from east to west through the north. The island is 2 miles in diameter, so it's pretty tiny. So on Tuesday, October 12th, we took an overnight flight, my wife and I, from Los Angeles to Tahiti. There we are, arriving pre-dawn at around 5 a.m. local time in Tahiti at the little airport there. I was surprised, but it's not a very big place. At that point, Karen, my XYL, took off on a Air Tahiti multi-island pass for 2 weeks to go snorkeling in various places in central French Polynesia. And Wednesday afternoon, I took off to go to Rimatara after several delays by the airline because their computers had been down. And I got in just before sunset, and there's all my luggage, including my nylon vest in the back of the car. We were a little bit delayed because when I arrived at Rimatara, they were having a memorial service for the person who had just died that day of COVID in Rimatara, and that was being held in the baggage claim area. So everything was kind of at a standstill there. But I was able to get up there by dark. Kenji and Brenda are the people that run the La Perouche Rouge. And one of the nice things about that was they had great breakfasts and dinners included with the lodging every day. So that was super. I did take 4 freeze-dried dinners because I knew that at least the first 3 days I would be operating during moonrise, would also coincide with dinner time. So I had made arrangements with Kenji to have a pot of to boil water in my bungalow, so I could eat the freeze-dried dinners and not miss any moonrise times. So there's the setup in the bungalow. And here's a close-up of the equipment. This time I took the Russian EB104 2500 watt amplifier, which started out the first few days running 1500 watts output, which I thought was going to be a big help to, and was a big help to have the smaller stations copy me. So Thursday morning, first thing, there's the antenna and the mast as I took it out of the carrying bag, and everything is telescoped inside of everything else. And I started putting things together. And then we started learning about Murphy. And he really hit Rimatara hard that week. By the end of Thursday, I was ready to put up the antenna, and I got a helper from the bungalow next door, Patrick, a French visitor from France. And I think he understood some English. Unfortunately, we didn't communicate quite well enough, and he helped me raise the antenna, but he didn't stop when the mast got all the way up, like I stopped raising it with the rope and the falling derrick, but he kept pushing on the mast, and he did a good job pulling out the stake on the on one of the guy ropes behind him, and the antenna came right down over my head and crashed to the ground. And it bent all the elements, of course, and broke one in half. And I looked at the situation for about a minute or so and wondered what the heck I was going to do. And then I decided there was no way I was going to get on for moonrise that night. So we lifted the antenna off the mast and put it back over on some plastic chairs that I had assembled it on. And I resolved to start from scratch in the morning and rebuild everything again. And so that involved going along the road on Friday morning and finding a used pop can by the side of the road. And I borrowed a file and a pair of tin snips from Kenji. And I took one of the 4-inch long quarter-inch nails out of my I usually hold down my aiming circle into the ground. So I had 4 of those. I took one of those and I filed off the head of the nail. So I just had a 1/4-inch long rod then to use as a bar in between halves of my element, and I wrapped that with Noah locks and aluminum from the pop can, which after I had scraped off all of the coating on the pop can, so I had good continuity with the aluminum pop can. And I took the 2 halves of the element that were still good and square, and I put them together. There you can see me pushing them together around the spine that I made in the middle to give it rigidity. And I filed off the broken ends as best I could, and then I wrapped the splice in Noah locks and more aluminum from the pop can, and the continuity looked good. So I wrapped it up with tape, and I stuck it on the antenna. And this time I went around and I put double spikes on all of the guy ropes to make sure that they would hold. The ground was very, very loose red clay, and so I double spiked everything to make sure that they would hold, because when it gets wet, there's not a whole lot of holding power in it. So there's the antenna the second time around on Friday afternoon, and you can't see it, but the element that was fixed is right up here, and the mast is ready to be to accept the antenna. And just to make sure, you know, I mean, the mast had flipped over with the antenna, so you know, I just wanted to make sure that everything was still aligned right and the guy ropes were still right. So I raised and lowered the mast a couple times to make sure. Oh, well, first of all, there was another problem. I got bitten by wasps on this table here that was in the porch that I had to move. So that was a bit disconcerting too. But then there was the problem of this mast. When I checked the mast to make sure I could still raise the antenna on Friday morning, I mean, this is the way I usually have it, where the mast sits in a high density polyethylene cradle, and I can raise it and lower it back in there. And then on the bottom, I have a bracket that I use to hold the base of it in place. Well, I raised it and lowered it, and the cradle broke right in half, so that was useless. So I turned the mast upside down, and now I have the bottom of the mast up, the bottom of the prop to hold the mast, and the bottom was made by I put a 3/8 inch 10-inch spiral spike in the ground and put with a fender washer over it, and left several inches of it sticking up so I could locate the bottom of the prop, and it would stay in one place. So although this was rude and crude, I retied the lines onto the little guy stakes that I had to hold the prop, and it wound up holding the mast okay. So then finally I was able to lift the antenna and go and stick it on the end of the mast, and it was ready to be raised by late afternoon on Friday. And this time I walked down the hill and asked Kenji if he could be free for a few minutes and come up and help me. And he spoke pretty good English. In fact, very good English, much better than my French or whatever they speak down there. It's some Polynesian dialect. All these places are just local dialects. And anyway, he understood the problem, and he stopped when it got vertical, and it went up fine. And so I was able to then stake down the mast, the base of the mast, and put the aiming circle down on it. You'll notice there's a fourth 4-inch nail that's not there anymore. And I aligned the antenna on the setting sun and was ready to get on the air that moonrise. So there's a picture of what it looked like after it was up, and my little bungalow, and that is looking south. So it didn't take more than a day or so, and I found that the amplifier quit. And I found what the problem was the end of the coax coming from the antenna. Actually, it was the end of the piece of coax had an end connector on it, and it had either been somehow distressed by the power going through it, or it was dirty to start with. But I found a piece, a foreign object in there, and that was shorting the connector. So I had taken these things, especially this little soldering tool I had in my toolkit, and I had lens cleaning wipes, and I had some silicone grease that I use in my connectors. I didn't take the cardboard with it. I just had a bare tube, and I was able to clean out the connector and put more silicone in there, and it worked fine. Then we had an electrical storm, and there was lightning all around, and all night long I was counting between the flashes and the thunder, and it came within 2 miles of me, and the whole time I had to finally shut down and disconnect the coax and put it in a Ziploc bag and also in a pill bottle, plastic pill bottle that I took along for that purpose, and stuck it under the bungalow so it wouldn't get wet. So that cost me about half a pass, and finally in the wee hours of the morning for my moon set, things looked calm enough that I was able to connect it back up and work people during my moon set. And they had heard about it even up in Tahiti. They'd heard about this horrible storm that we had down in the Austral Islands. It doesn't look so bad here, but believe me, it was pouring rain. It was the lightning and thunder was terrible. And then we had this WXJTX bug that wouldn't allow it caused problems with people using compound call signs. I was using a compound call sign, FO/W7GJ, which always worked fine in previous versions of WSJTX, but something had changed in this most recent version and it didn't work. So from then on, I just changed to using W7GJ and people were happy working me, and that worked fine. And bless Joe Taylor, within 2 days he had that fixed, but I didn't want to confuse the issue by for my last 2 days going back to W7 to FO/W7GJ. So I stayed the course. And then during a heavy rainstorm, the SWR and the amplifier went up to a 1.8, and it didn't just cut out; it blew a capacitor on the low pass filter board. And I found that because I was able to open up the amplifier. I had a small portable Swiss Army knife with a tiny screwdriver that had a tinier screwdriver on the end, and it just fit my 1 millimeter Allen head screws that were in the back of the Russian amplifier. So I took off the back panel and could see that within the red circle, you can see what was blown. And that's the close-up of what it looked like. So I spent the morning down at the place where we eat, which is where there was Wi-Fi, and spent as much email as I could. Sometimes it took me an hour to send an email from that Wi-Fi spot, because that was the good Wi-Fi spot, and it was just very, very marginal. But AG6EE and K0DAS suggested that since I was able to get in the amplifier and show them what the problem was, they said, why don't you just try to bypass the filter? So in fact, Rod did some modeling, and he said, we have a filter like that here that AC0RA was using, and it does wind up transforming the impedances and so on. So you probably still have an SWR, but at least you could maybe try it. So I did try it, and there it is. It's bypassed. I just hooked up the input to the filter over to the output of the filter, and I wound up with a 1.2 to 1 SWR. I was able to run 1200 watts. And that's what I ran the entire rest of the trip. And so I was back on the moon for the next moonrise. So I had just missed one pass, almost all of one pass. And then, every night I was getting killed by mosquitoes and these bugs. And these bugs apparently were in the soil. That's what my doctor tells me when I got home anyway. So that they were in my socks and my shoes, and they were just tropical bugs and stuff. But I had pustules the size of marbles on my toes from these bugs that were in the soil and the clay out there. And the mosquitoes, I had a rain jacket on at night, and they were biting me through the rain jacket. So, I mean, they were bad too. The reason there were so many mosquitoes is because Kenji was very proud of this large taro plantation he had in the swamp just west of where we ate. And although the swamp made great ground gain to the west on my moonset, it also breeded mosquitoes that were just very voracious at night. And of course, the antenna clearing was this clay, which as soon as it got a little wet was what we call gumbo clay. And it would build up on the bottom of my shoes about 6 inches and make it almost impossible to run out there to turn the antenna and then run back in. Then I had to somehow scrape off the clay before or take off my shoes and just walk in on the clay dust into the bungalow. So that was another place where Murphy got me. Well, there was also 2 other instances where Murphy got me. I had taken along a 5-inch whisper fan that ran on 12 volts, and I taped it up on the end of that bed to make sure that I had plenty of air circulating toward the amplifier and the exciter. And I didn't have guards on it, and you know, I cut appendages on both hands, and so luckily I had first aid stuff and bandages and things, so I didn't lose too much blood, and I got them all bandaged up. So anyway, oh, and then and then there were the roosters that 24 hours a day the roosters would be crowing. So you know, these were just wild roosters everywhere. So I did the best I could. So one day I needed more headlamp batteries. I had already gone through my replacement headlamp batteries that I had brought down. So Kenji took me out for a ride to the store, which is like 5 minutes down the road, obviously. It was a half a mile away. And so we got the batteries. This was during the daytime. The moon was not up. And he said, "Hey, do you want to see the island?" And I said, "Oh, sure. This will be good. I'll be able to show people what Rimatara looks like." So here's the north end of the island. I mean, we did it. We went around the island. There's a road that goes around the island, you know, so we had 20 minutes. So we went around the island. Here's the harbor. It's north of the runway on the north end of the island. Obviously, it's not big enough for any big boats. When supplies come, the ships have to anchor outside the harbor, and then they use these little tiny boats to run out and fill them up and unload the big boats. So that's one of the ways that Rimatara has been able, because nobody can land there, it's one of the ways they've kept the island free of rats, which is unlike any of the other Austral islands. So as a result, Rimatara has the most coconut exports from the Austral Islands back to Tahiti. And they have, because rats apparently go up and they eat the coconut stems or something up the trees, and it's a real problem in the other islands. But Rimatara is free from rats, which helps that, and it also saves the rare Kuhl's rorikeet, which is a very, very endangered and rare bird there, which is gone from everywhere else. So, and that's all due to having no ships land there, and they have got big signs by the harbor that says no rats, and so you have to watch that. So then we went around to the east side of the island, and we saw an old 19th century village cemetery there. You can see these very old tombstones. Then we went through the bay at the south end of the island at Mutoarara Bay on the south end. Very pretty. And so this was, with all of the visits by Murphy, you know, I needed something to cheer me up. And boy, did I get cheered up by these guests from Tahiti. Ramon and Chantel were given a gift certificate by their kids. They gave them a ticket, and they said, you can spend 2 nights in Rimatara as a getaway. And so they flew down and they just were there for 2 nights. And so Saturday, I met them Friday night at dinner and then Saturday morning at breakfast. And at Saturday morning at breakfast, I was asking Kenji, I said, Kenji, is there some place that we could try? FO4BM has suggested a maritime store in Tahiti that might carry aluminum tubing, and it would be really nice, a nice backup if I could get some replacement 3/8 inch diameter aluminum tubing to replace my spliced element, so I'd have a real element for the second half of my trip up in the Marquesas. So Kenji was calling places in Tahiti to see when I went up through Tahiti on my way to the Marquesas if I could pick up some aluminum tubing. He was striking out. Anyway, Ramon was listening to this conversation, and he only speaks French, but he was listening to Kenji, and so he said, "What do you need?" And Kenji translated that to me, and I explained to him that I needed 9.5 millimeter aluminum tubing, and I needed a 1 meter long piece. And Ramon said, I have a cousin in Tahiti who has some aluminum tubing in his backyard. Let's call him and ask him what he has. So Chantel calls him on the phone, and 5 minutes later, there's a picture on her phone, on her cell phone, of cousin Guy holding a vernier caliper up next to this aluminum tubing in his backyard to show that it's 9.5 millimeters in diameter, or 3/8 of an inch. You can't make this stuff up. So here I am in French Polynesia. There's a source for 3/8 inch diameter tubing. I couldn't believe it. So Ramon says, Guy will meet you at the airport when you arrive on your way to the Marquesas with a 1 meter long piece of this tubing. So I said, I don't believe it, but it's just fantastic. So that was good news. So here's Saturday night, my last night with the antenna up, and there's a rainbow. And I thought, oh, that is a good sign. And then that Sunday morning, I was talked into getting on again for my moon set on Sunday morning. I had to sleep Sunday night because I was going to be taking down the antenna and packing up everything all day Sunday. But there were so many people who said, and especially a VK, who said, you know, I just need you to be on that moon set so that we have another chance to work. So I got on for my last moon set on Sunday morning, and I saw one of these Cool's lorikeets up in the tree as I was turning the antenna around to the west at the moon. And there it was, beaming out over the mosquito swamp to the ocean, which was a half a mile from the antenna. And I was 105 feet above the ocean. And starting at 10 degrees elevation, I started getting ground gain lobes. And at 3 degrees to minus 1.5 degrees, the ground gain was fantastic. And my last moon set, I worked 10 stations with the antenna aimed at the horizon, which was unheard of. And I was basically as fast as I could write them down and log them. And I was wishing that I could go to 30-second sequences on Q65, but that would confuse the issue too much. So it was just great. I was working Eastern European guys that had never been on EME before. That was their moon rise. It was my moon set. I worked the guy in Australia who was pointed up in the air with his little antennas. And I've never had ground gain like that. It was fantastic. So Monday morning, we're down there early to load up all the stuff and to do the air freight on the on the excess baggage. It always does my heart well to see them with the antenna and the mast here loaded onto the plane. I love watching that happen. And here we are in Tahiti, arriving in the midday back to Tahiti. I do remember Guy. There he was with the aluminum tubing for me. I couldn't believe it. And I had told Ramon, I said, you know, I may need a soldering gun, because we spent a half a day while Kenji called around the island in Rimatara to find somebody who had a soldering gun, and so I could fix the amplifier in Rimatara. And so I thought I might need to do some more soldering, because I had taken about 8 inches of solder from the guy. I paid him $10 to rent his soldering gun from him, and I took 8 inches of solder along when I left, but I didn't have a solder gun that would work on 230 volts. So there was Guy with a soldering gun and the 3/8 inch tubing. So I was off to a great start. There's the XYL arrived from our snorkeling adventures. So we went off to stay at a place who was Kenji's cousin, by the way, who had a bed and breakfast in Papeete. And from there, Kenji's cousin's daughter drove us down to a French restaurant in Papeete, where we had a great dinner and wonderful dessert, which I've never had before, pistachio souffle. Oh my word, that was great. And then we were up at 3:30 in the morning for our 6 a.m. departure to the Marquesas. And this is the spot where I had picked the site. It was the only place I could find in the Marquesas that had a clear shot out over the water on moonrise, which was necessary for Eastern Europeans and for South Africa. And I wanted to try to make sure to catch everybody. So we were going to be staying in an Airbnb in the little village of Ta'aoa, south of the main village of Tuona on the island. So there we are, taking off with the TX7MB face mask, double masking, of course. And there we are, arriving in Hiva OA, complete with the nylon vest filled with 11 pounds of goods. And this was our local supermarket. And we had 10 minutes to shop we got picked up at the airport. And then as we drove through Tuona, we had 10 minutes to quickly buy supplies before the store closed. All the stores closed between noon and 2 o'clock every day. So we got up to the Airbnb around 12:30, and I started putting together the antenna and the mast on the porch. And I had taken a jar opener, an old-fashioned jar opener that we had, to re-round the larger aluminum tubings, which just always get banged up during transit when they throw the nylon bags onto the concrete floors or little trucks or whatever they have, the baggage handling. So this worked very, very well for re-rounding the larger aluminum tubes. And then, of course, all the other tubes are inside those tubes. So by sunset, I had the mast up, and there it is with the falling derrick ready to be raised. All I needed was the antenna. So the next day, I put the antenna together and carried it out to the yard. And by sunset that night, it was up on the mast overlooking the ocean, 217 feet above the ocean. So here's how I made the coax reach to the shack. It almost reached, but I had to splice on a 4-foot piece of LMR 600 Ultraflex to go through the window to the amp. So I had 54 feet of LMR 600. Only had 50 feet in Rimatara, which was, you know, I mean, I had taken an extra 35-foot piece because I figured, you know, I want to make sure I have plenty. But the areas to set up the antenna were so small at both of these places that I didn't even use that extra 35 feet. That was the station set up next to the window. And here's a map of Hiva OA. The Hiva OA, there aren't really any maps. So this is the map that we used as reference. It's on the side of the pizza place in downtown Atuona. And here's where we were staying. If you can see my cursor, is down here in the southwest corner of the island with the great shot to the east on moonrise. Here's the airport here in a high plateau in the middle of the island surrounded by mountains. And we went on excursions up to the north here, to the north coast to Hanayapa, and out to the east to Puamau to see the big tikis out there. And our first road trip was on Thursday. It's finished the antenna Wednesday night. Worked all night and then into the morning on Thursday. And then after moonset, we took off on Thursday to go on a drive up to Hanayapa to the north side of the island. And here's what it looked like. These are the roads in Hiva OA. They're concrete. There's no shoulder. And in most places, the concrete slab bends and it's 1.5 feet down to the ground. In some places, it's 1,000 feet down to the ground. Here's locals visiting on the road and mostly off the road in downtown Hanayapa. Then we took after moonset one day, we took a trip up to the big cemetery overlooking Tahauku Harbor, which is where Paul Gauguin is buried. There it's the Paul Gauguin grave. There's one of his paintings of Tahiti. And then on Saturday, October 30th, I knew that we were going to be having the moon up during the daytime. So later days probably would not provide enough time to drive to the east end of the island, which took 6 hours. So to go there and come back. So we did it on Saturday, October 30th. We went out to Puamau to see the big tikis, and here's the road with rocks all over it. Luckily, the only traffic we ran into on the road was people walking baby carriages on the road. I have no idea where these people lived. They must have been hidden in the jungle somewhere, but they had no sidewalks or no place to walk their kids in the stroller, except on this road covered with rocks. That's the terrain that we traversed during the trip to Puamau. Gives you a feeling for what Hiva OA looks like, and the trouble in finding a spot to set up where you've got a clear shot at a horizon. And here was the collection of tikis at Puamau, the unique fish tiki. I think this is the only fish tiki in the South Pacific. And here are the more sacred soft red stone ones that they have protected coverings over. So as you can see here, my moonrise was getting closer and closer to sunrise, and most of the activity was moving into the daytime hours. And unfortunately, after the first few days, the moon was getting very, very high. I had the antenna elevated all the way. You can see the horizon to the west was 20 degrees. So I didn't work the requests from Japanese stations to work them on sporadic E-skip or TE. Here's a close-up of my simple little hinged mount, which held up very, very well. And there I am fighting the winds at maximum elevation. The antenna, you know, the tip of the antenna is 50 feet in the air. So, and I'm already over 200 feet above the ocean. And so the prevailing winds were gusting in there. And it was, there were some heart-stopping moments there when the antenna was twisting around and blowing in the wind. I really hated to try to elevate that high, but I had to because people didn't listen to me and get on early in my trip. And they would say, okay, I'm going to be on tomorrow for my moonset. And oh, my moon is going to be 90 degrees. Oh, okay, well, I'll do my best, which is 65 degrees, but I'm going to be well off the moon, and it's going to be a real chore to try to hold the antenna that high anyway. But I did work a couple stations there. My last day, I didn't work anybody. And there was plenty of time to do a local excursion to the little village where we were staying. We went to the sacred site Upeke, which is up on the hillside above Ta'aoa. Here's where they used to do human sacrifices on this tiki. Here's the village beach in Ta'aoa. And they also had a 19th century church there too. It's a tiny little village. And we did a final visit to Hinayapa on the north side of the island on Friday, November 5th. And all the little villages had these beautiful landscaped roadsides. As you would enter the village, you knew you were getting close to the village because there would be flowers on both sides of the road. It was gorgeous. Then that's the bay at Hinayapa and outriggers at the bay. And on the way back, I stopped at the Smiling Tiki with a smiling EME-er, but he's got his mask on because there were people there taking my picture for me. And I tried some E-skip on FT8 to the southeast towards South America, but it didn't work. I think it's because the high TEC area was directly overhead from me. But this gives you an idea of the space that I had to work with. It wasn't very big compared to the size of the antenna. So just before the huge deluge Sunday morning, November 7th, I had already pulled off the antenna at dawn, and then it poured rain for the rest of the day. And that was the biggest rainstorm that we had in the Marquesas. So it was pretty good that it only rained when I was taking down the antenna. Monday morning, we were waiting for the airline counter to open up. We were up early. We found out that the airplane terminal doesn't open so early. There's our plane landing, give you an idea of the mountains around the airport. So we flew back to Papeete on Tahiti, and then we took another overnight flight. We were home in Montana by Tuesday night, November 9th. I want to thank all these folks who contributed to make these DXpeditions possible. And these were the 120 stations that I contacted from Rimatara, which was my personal best so far. My previous best had been 119 stations from Nauru. And I worked 119 stations from Hiva OA. So just briefly, I'll say what worked, what didn't work, thoughts about Q65, and then the next rare DXCC. What worked was operating at night from Rimatara. Despite the higher degradation, it was great to operate at night. And I always like to do this from the tropics because during the daytime, the high electron content overhead can just be a killer. I had great short, low loss feed line from both places. I had my separate AirSpy R2 receiver with a preamp. It worked great. The amplifier, although I had problems with it in Rimatara, when I bypassed the low pass filter, I was able to get 1200 watts out of it. And so it stayed working throughout the trip. Despite that, when I was in Rimatara, I had my house sitter friend here in Missoula send me my M squared 6M1K2 as a backup. And I finally got it back last week here in Missoula. So it never did make it. So the moral of the story there is you better have everything you need with you, because there's no way people are going to send you anything that you need to get, even if it's shipped special. The moonset from Rimatara, it not only worked, I mean, it rolled up my socks. It was amazing. Moonrise from Hiva OA, below 3 degrees, from 3 degrees down to minus 1.5 degrees, was phenomenal also. But after that, because I was so high, I was really too high. And from 3 degrees up, I just had to elevate to do anything from the Marquesas. What didn't work, ionospheric propagation, I tried. I was in the wrong place, the wrong time, I guess. I didn't work anybody on FT8. The daytime operation with a high TEC in the same direction as my moonrise from Hiva OA was a killer. And then there were auroral disturbances, which killed me for a couple days, really slowed me down. And our real problem was horizon-only stations in North America waiting to try to work me until the moon was way too high for me to aim at them. And from Rimatara, I had no internet except for a couple of nights when everybody had gone to bed. I could connect to the ON4KST EME chat page twice. So, but it was almost impossible to send emails from my bungalow in Rimatara. My thoughts on Q65 was that I worked stations that were new to EME that weren't in my call3.txt file. So, I mean, it really worked there. I worked some stations in between contacts that I was making. I'd stop, work the other station, then come back to the first station. That's something that Q65 lends itself to, because it sends both calls with every transmission. That would never have worked in JT65. So that's a big plus. One place where it could really help is in deep search, if they would use a lookup to match with calls in the call3.txt for more sensitivity, it would really, really help. The only way that you can do this now is to, if you have internet, which I didn't have in Rimatara, have somebody say, hey, I'm going to be calling you now on this frequency. And then you can put their call sign in to the program, and then you get like 3 dB of gain sensitivity as when you enter their call in and decode it. But if you don't have their call entered in, you lose that sensitivity. So it would really be nice. It's a perfect application for the computer to be searching to see who it is that might be calling you. And then you could take it from there and just have everything work the same way, just exchange the call signs, exchange the reports, and do all that. But that would really help. But I know that the development team for WSJTX has really been busy with other bugs right now. And unfortunately, we lost a key member of the team, G4WJS, Bill Somerville. His memorial service is this Friday. And I know Joe Taylor has been moving right now. So it's a tough time, but I hope at some point that there could be some improvements to Q65. It could be really an amazing tool. As it is, it's a better tool than JT65, but it could be really amazing. So the next rare DXCC, people have been asking me, where are you going now? Well, I don't know. COVID, they're saying, is going to be around all year. So some of these DXCC I've been looking at are still on lockdown and you can't fly in or out of them. Cycle 25 is picking up, which probably means more auroral disturbances. And so I'm thinking, I don't know. I'm not sure about this. It sure would be nice to be getting more stations to try EME. I was surprised that there are so many good single Yagi stations in North America who needed these DXCC, but they weren't around. They didn't get on and call me. So it would be nice to have some more people around. So that's the synopsis. There's also a PDF explaining, highlighting the trip, and the whole trip report is on my website. And I open it up for if anybody has any questions. If we have time, Paul, for questions.
Absolutely, sure. You got lots of time here, and see if anybody can turn on their microphones, or do I have to do anything at this end?
I got a question, Lance.
There you go.
I have an answer. It might not be right, but go ahead.
What mode in Q65 was your favorite? And also, when you didn't have when you had bad internet connection, how did you sync your computer time? Do you have a GPS on that or something?
Okay, those are good questions. I was using Q65-60 A for all the contacts. And that's pretty much what people are using on 6-meter EME now. And it even works on 2 meters. Although during the EME contest, I got on a little bit and found that, boy, it sure was nice to work Q65-30 A on 2 meters, because the contacts came faster than I could log them. But on 6 meters, you can't do that. We did some experiments with that when Q65 first came out, and you need the 60 seconds on 6 meters. So that I stuck to that the whole time. As far as setting the clock, I did have a GPS puck, and I couldn't get it to work on WSJT on Windows 10. So, but luckily I didn't need it, because I had internet the whole time when I was in the Marquesas, and apparently my connection was good enough in Rimatara for Meinberg to connect and get the time right. And the first couple days, I took my computer down to the Wi-Fi spot down at the dining pavilion, and I made sure that my laptop was synced properly, and then I took it back up to the bungalow. And then after that, I I didn't feel that I had to, because it seemed like it was, I had bought a SIM card for my phone that was a data SIM card when I arrived at 5 a.m. in Tahiti, and I didn't leave until like 3 p.m. I took a taxi for 10 minutes down to the shopping center that sold cell phone things, and I bought a SIM card for my phone that was a data SIM card that they guaranteed would work on any island in French Polynesia. And the only island it doesn't really work on is Rimatara, which is like the poor redheaded stepchild. I mean, it just, down there, they really don't have much connection to anywhere. And even the really good Wi-Fi, reputable Wi-Fi that I had down at the place where we ate was marginal, to the point where it sometimes took an hour to send an email. So it just, but apparently when I would hook up to my cell phone, that I was getting enough to periodically set the Mindberg. So that's how I did it. Yes, I'm
almost
going to
a Murphy,
buy a new. I'm going to buy. Yeah, that's right. It was Murphy. I'm going to buy a new USB GPS thing to make sure when I don't have any Wi-Fi anywhere and I have no cell coverage someplace, that I can at least set my clock with GPS.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Hey,
Well,
Lance,
if you do have any, I'm sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Lance, it's Chris, N4SIX. Did you use your radio receiver, or did you use SDR for this trip?
No, as I said, I used my AirSpy R2 receiver for the whole trip. I just used the FTF 857 as my transmitter, and
Okay,
I never
thanks.
used that as a receiver at all. And the AirSpy worked great, especially with the preamp. And I've got on my website, I show how I use the preamp to split out from the preamp to go to the separate receiver. And I just got a new 6-meter travel amplifier, the Expedition amplifier, that's got a special breakout for a separate receiver in it from the antenna relay. So I'm not going to. Apparently, this little tiny amplifier will give me 1,500 watts. So I'll probably be selling the EB104 amp, because it's just so. I mean, it took up a whole suitcase. So I'll be selling that amp and getting this other more portable amp.
What's your
use
new
on
amp?
the Expeditions. It's a custom made amp by DX Shop in the UK.
Got it.
Hey, Lance, this is Peter. How are you doing? AlphaGo 6
Peter.
Echo. Hey.
Peter, thank you for all your guidance and encouragement when I was in Rimatara.
Well, I got to make a presentation only on how I was preparing the package for you, because Murphy was all on the both sides of the line, because when I was about to get all these capacitors and so forth, we had a huge storm here and all the power went out for 24 hours. So I was running on batteries, generator on patio and so forth, just to be able to solder. It was crazy. It was crazy. I mean, like whatever could go wrong over that few days went wrong, and what couldn't went wrong as well. When it comes to amplifier, actually, what I said, like back in going to CM79 and similar places, like, as I said, I'd like to carry the heatsink only one way. So I used basically copper-based plate, where the transistors and so forth are, and I'm using water cooling. So basically I can, because it's a copper, so I can basically pour any kind of water inside, not aluminum. Aluminum wouldn't survive that, but copper survives that. So basically I can bring any kind of water, and basically after the thing is over, I basically leave the water wherever, I don't have to carry it back and forth. So like, would you consider like an amplifier like this, which basically comes much lighter, because you can get water pretty much everywhere, and it could be from swamp, doesn't matter. And basically, you don't have to carry this big heatsink back and forth through the planes, and having like an overweight. Wouldn't be a solution.
It sounds like it might be a great solution. I started out on my first 6-meter EME expedition to Rimatara was with a water-cooled amplifier.
Right.
And unfortunately, that was not a closed circuit water circulator. And so I had to continually fill the wastebasket with ice cubes, and then have the water come out into another wastebasket, and go empty the wastebasket, put more ice cubes and cold water in it. And it wound up being a real mess. My wife slipped on the floor because of all the water everywhere, and she still has problems with her knee because of that. And but something with a closed loop thing certainly would be a good way to go.
All right. I'm considering like, either open loop or closed loop, like basically even like a closed loop, but which can be basically transported empty, so you can cut on the weight.
The weight is a huge problem. This
This
amplifier that I've got here from DX Shop weighs 5.5 kilograms, which is not too bad. The EB104 amp with the extra cooling stand that I made for it weighs almost 20 pounds. So, and it's quite large. So it's not just weight, it's, the space is a big problem when we're trying to fly someplace. Of course, driving somewhere is a whole different deal. I mean, I could take this amp anywhere, but if I'm driving, but for flying, especially with these more ridiculous limits that they're putting on carry-on and checked baggage, I had to air freight. I was only allowed to carry one suitcase as checked baggage, so the rest of them had to be air freighted, and then with the small amount of carry-on, it was, I had to take the computer out of its case and just put it in my backpack, and I just had this little tiny lightweight 13-inch computer, so it's, I tried to. I was jettisoning things out of my suitcases and packages before I left. It was just crazy trying to meet all these weight requirements and space requirements.
Yeah,
That's
that's true.
Lance, what receiver software did you have the AirSpy talking to?
I use SDR console.
Okay.
And I know that N2 EME has given a presentation about very fancy ways to listen to different parts of the band, and I could be listening to FT8 with it, and at the same time I'm on EME and all that stuff. But I haven't done, I just have not done any of that. I just use it to listen to one frequency, and I put the SDR console. I just listened to a 5 kilohertz band pass. And
well, with a 13-inch monitor, you can't do much. If Paul's got a 50-inch monitor that he does all that.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I have enough trouble with my little tiny screen here, to see everything that's going on. But it works very well. And, you know, I use the Air Spy receiver here at home too, even for EME or for FT8. And I repeatedly, and I even used it on 2-meter EME during the EME contest, and it outperformed my K3 there too. So I'm sold on using the little STR receivers. As long as you've got a preamp ahead of it, it works great.
Cool.
Lance, this is Jamie, K6NGN. I was wondering if you had tried any other receivers for either 6 or 2.
Well,
Of the STR type.
no.
Okay.
Well, I take that back. You know, I did do a few DXpeditions with a little USB thumb drive type $28 receiver.
You're talking about the
And that's what
dongles,
I
aren't you?
used.
Those
Yeah,
are the
that's what-
dongles.
Yep, and that's what I used for for several DXpeditions, and it was still better than my K3, so I used that. But I switched to the AirSpy R2 on the recommendation of I think it was Bill in North Dakota suggested that there was more dynamic range in the AirSpy R2. So that's why I just replaced. I got 3 of them, and I used 2 of them here, and I have one just for DXpeditions.
Thanks.
I always take one of those little dongles though as a backup, just in case. Anybody else have any comments or questions, thoughts?
Have you ever had one of those fail, Lance, like the SDR receiver in the field?
No.
And do you
No,
put outside
haven't.
air on them? Because mine gets really warm.
You know, I haven't had any problem with it. You know, they were all in pretty cool places. You know, I had plenty of ventilation. You know, I didn't have any air conditioning wherever I was, but I did have fans, and I had ceiling fans in the Marquesas until I discovered after the first day that they were causing me RFI noise. So we had to turn off all the ceiling fans in the building whenever I was on the air. But I didn't have that option in Rimatara. So I had my little whisper fan that ate my fingers, but the air was circulating. You know, there was plenty of wind. There was plenty of wind in the Marquesas all the time. The prevailing winds being 200 feet above the ocean, facing the prevailing winds. It was always windy there. And in Rimatara, I just kept the doors open, and the winds came through all the time, except when I had to close them off to try to reduce the mosquitoes coming in at night.
How often do you clean the antennas for salt spray?
I usually try to do that before each trip. I wipe them down with one of these microfiber rags and dip them in water and soapy water and wash it off. I have not really noticed a problem since I use so much NOAA locks on it at all of the joints. The one time that I didn't use the NOAA locks in the joints where other people were helping me assemble the antenna, and I was anxious to get the antenna up. I was by my moonrise, which was, you know, really approaching too fast. That was at TX5K. And every day I noticed I was receiving less and less and less well. And by the time I took down the antenna, I noticed arcing had been taking place in the reflector elements at the joints. And so in receive, I basically it wasn't even connected. So that's why I make sure now to clean off all the joints and then put NOAA locks on there and make sure that they're good and tight.
Thank you.
I like your idea, Dave, too, and maybe Peter does this, of maybe slotting the larger elements and sliding the 3/8 tubing in and using a stainless steel hose clamp. Peter, is that the way you do it?
Yes, well, I mean, I have a repair kit, which basically is for you would be like not 3/8, no, it would be, what is that, 5/8 inch, which basically, like, you know, it has a hose clamps, and like if something breaks, you can put it over and tighten it up. Easy little repair kit, even though I'm basically using way better way of having these elements. I have a connectors which like the elements are threaded on at the ends, and I got a connector which sort of have a defined breakpoint. So if it falls, it usually breaks in the middle. And because I'm using 3/8 and only center, so I got a spare centers. And I have these spare ends. So basically I turn the element around, put it the spare connector and screw it back in, you know, so which makes it really easy. I would have to send you a sample, but basically, like if the antenna falls, it always breaks in this connector, pretty much always. And the connector is very easy to manufacture and easy to put on the other side of the element. So when the wind blew out my antenna in DN14-2 last spring, and like broke 3 elements, it was like a 30 seconds repair to get it back on the air.
So you have a weak point that's not
I have a defined
not
weak
the
point,
element
which basically breaks, yes.
Yeah, it's not the element itself that's the weak point.
It's a weak point which connects the element, and you know, basically if something goes wrong, weak point breaks, and all I do is turn the element the other way, put another weak point, and when I get home, I take the left-handed tail and take the what's left out inside the element out, and you know, good to go again. I destroyed probably only one element during my, well, really like destroyed only one element, like the way that I bent it, that I didn't feel like I'm gonna put it back over like 2 years. And
This was the first time that I'd actually broken.
And it has a rough life, my antennas, for sure, on the portable all the time.
This is the first time I've broken an element, but I'm going to take an extra 3/8 inch diameter element with me from now on that I can replace if I break another one. They're easy to put in there, and I've got a few ounces left to get up to 50 pounds on the antenna bag. I think I'm at 49 3/4 pounds or something with that bag and the mast. So I can throw in even a couple extra 3/8 inch elements, and that's what I think I'm going to do too.
The other thing, Lance, like if you buy the seamless 35 wall, which is still reasonably cheap, 28 is really expensive. 35 is usually cheap as a 6061 and not 6063. 6061 is quite strong. I believe like 35, it's really lightweight, and I believe 35 you probably can put more of them rather than one, and it will hold like 1 meter on 35 wall instead of 49 or 55 would be wonderful. Like you can save plenty of weight, and you know, no offense to the antenna.
Yeah, a lot of the TV antennas use some really lightweight aluminum tubing too. Well, I hope that if I haven't worked you so far on one of these expeditions, I hope that I will catch you next time from wherever it happens to be. Thank you very much for having me on here, and good luck to everybody.
Thank you, Lance.
Thanks a
Thank you,
lot.
Lance.
Lance. That was awesome.
Thank you, Lance.
Salud.
Salute.
Thank you.
Hello, Rafa. I'm glad we worked.
Thank you, Lance. Thank you for the QSO on TX7.
All right. See you guys next time. Bye for now.
Thank you. 73 all.